Hi, my name is Pete Heiniger, and this is my wife, Shara, and this is the first episode of Stages podcast. So this is numero uno. And I'm pretty excited about it because when we talk about cancer, one of the goals for Stages is to kind of take the conversation that's around cancer and cancer fighters and kind of break down that stigma and some of the things that are thought and the way people react to it. But what I'm really excited about is that you often hear from my perspective, the cancer fighter and chemotherapy and mental health and all those things. And those things are great to talk about. But I think one of the things that is most overlooked is the caregiver. And so the perspective from the caregiver is so important because they're going through a whole different range of challenges. So they're kind of walking your journey and your fight and your battle with you, but they also have one of their own that's different than yours. And so I always want to make sure that her voice is heard and her perspective is heard, because I think it's one of the most challenging things in the whole journey is the caregiver and what they face. So one of the things that I wanted to do is just kind of give you a chance to, as a caregiver, you didn't just start out as a caregiver for somebody who had cancer. You started out as a caregiver of 5 daughters. And so you have 5 daughters. So what I wanted you to do is just take some time to introduce our daughters by name and then just kind of tell where they're at right now, because they used to all be at home and we used to have chaos and everything like that. And now some of them are all grown up and they're out of the house. And so why don't you just tell a little bit about the first thing that you were a caregiver for, and that was 5 beautiful girls.
So we met in Denver, and then we had our first 2 girls, Brianna and Monique, in the cities in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Then we have Becca in Brainerd, Minnesota. Then we had, she's gonna be annoyed with me now. Then we had Mia up in British Columbia, Canada, in Prince George. And then we had Zebra down in Modesto, California. They're currently ages 23 through 17. So we have Mia and Zebra home with us. And then Becca lives in Gunnison, Colorado, Western Colorado. And then Monique is up in Oregon with her husband, David. And then Brianna, the oldest, is in Chicago.
Okay. So you're gonna, you've kind of introduced the girls and kind of what they're doing. Brianna's in Chicago and she's teaching school, and we're kind of excited about that. But let's talk just a little bit. Kieran is also another part of our family too, which is like our, he's her fiance. We're supposed to get married this summer, and then COVID and everything happened, and we had to put the plans on hold, and of course trips to Europe and stuff were put on hold. But they just recently, after what was it, 18 months that they hadn't seen each other, got to see each other. Brianna was able to go to the UK and see Kieran, and so we're excited about that addition to our family as well. And so the perspective that I want you to hear is that, Shara's journey as a caregiver started way early, right? I mean, she was being pregnant and then taking care of kids, like for most of, those years. And then of course we went through the teenage years and all those things. And we're still in some of those teenage years. And so it's always been something that you've done. You've been the mama, you've been the soccer practice driver, you've been the cross country driver, you've been the chauffeur back and forth across town. And for those of you who are familiar with Colorado Springs, our daughters went to Manitou Springs High School, but we lived on the east side in the Stetson Powers corridor. And so that, left a lot of driving, a lot of things, and coordinating calendars and all kinds of things. So Shara's already kind of worn this role in one unique way with our daughters. And of course, then with one car, it was, trying to get my job lined up and schedules. And so there's just a lot of chaos in what she was doing. But so we have all of that going on, and our girls are going through that. And then some of them have gone on to college, and then 2019 hits, and I'm executive pastor at a large church here in Colorado Springs. And in 2019, I start to have these attacks where I feel like I'm having some heart trouble or something, and I don't know what's going on. And so I go to the emergency twice, and one time by ambulance, and I go in there and
That was a lovely call.
yeah.
I'm called the ambulance. I think I'm dying. I'm gonna sit down on the front yard now while I wait on them.
Yeah. Yeah, Shara wasn't home. So, and I was the only one home. So I had to kind of navigate getting to the hospital because I thought I was having like a heart attack or something. But long story short is they tested me. My heart was fine. They felt like I was probably having some anxiety attack. A busy time of the year for a large church. We're coming into Christmas. We're getting ready for what that's going to look like in 2019. It's all pre-COVID and everything. And so we just got a lot of change and a lot of transition. But in the midst of that, the doctor goes, well, that's fine, but not to make you more full of anxiety. But I see a big tumor that's against your heart and lungs. And so that started this whole kind of cancer journey for me, because shortly thereafter, in February of 2020, right before COVID hits, I have to go in for this huge surgery, right? And I have Dr. Erickson, and it's a robotic surgery with a Da Vinci machine and everything. And they go in and they have to collapse my right lung, and they have to go in and take this out. And it's really kind of fantastic, but it's probably too grody to talk about on a podcast. But they get the tumor, and 99% of thymoma tumors, which is what this was, are usually cancerous. But they don't grow fast, and they don't often metastasize or move outside. So you don't get like a stage 4 often with them at all. And so once you remove them, you kind of don't have any more problems. But ironically, this thing was benign. So it wasn't cancerous at all. And so, dodged a bullet, and prayers were heard and everything like that. And so we kind of moved on thinking, okay, that's it. Then COVID hits, and then quickly I start to notice that this little mole that has been on my leg for forever started to change shape. And of course, if you're familiar with melanoma, then like I was taking pictures because it was COVID and they wouldn't let you just come into the doctor. And I'm like sending that there, and they're sending it to a dermatologist. And anyway, long story short, it is melanoma. I have to go in. She removes most of it and some other trouble areas that she was concerned about. Only one of them, the one that I was concerned about, was melanoma. And so then I had to go in for a surgery and have that all cleared out. Now, a complication out of that surgery is like, well, the first thing is my mom died of metastatic melanoma of the liver. And so that became like this huge scare, like, oh no.
That was it was a melanoma.
Yes.
That spread internally instead of.
Yes. And so it had taken my mom. My mom went really fast. My brother and I had flown out there, and then within 3 days, my mom was taken. I mean, we put her in hospice, and 72 hours later, she was gone. And so it was something that's hereditary and everything like that. So that always kind of scared me and put, the fear in me, like, oh no, like I'm starting this melanoma. I got to stay on top of this and watch all these things and how that goes. A few weeks later, out of that, after I get out of surgery and everything, it's kind of an outpatient surgery. They go in, try to make sure they got all the cancerous tissue, and then they release me. But a few weeks after that, I had like a clotting issue, and it was causing some pain. And so I went in to find out what that was. And so again, kind of this kind of thing that keeps happening during these doctor visits, that they're like, well, we saw the clotting, that's fine, we're all done with that. However, I see all these lesions on your liver. So right away, I want you to hear kind of how my journey is that I'm thinking my mom died of metastatic melanoma of the liver. I just had melanoma, so oh no. And once it gets to your liver, melanoma is just fast. It's lightning fast. So I was scared, right? Because he was just seeing lesions. He's not an oncologist. And so we kind of had to move to taking a biopsy and doing all those things. And so they take a biopsy, they find out that it's not melanoma, it's not liver cancer. And so now we're looking for the primary source. And we finally find out, and I hear the words, I'm actually in an executive meeting at church with my executive team. And then I get called out of that. I walk out, I sit down in my office, it's my oncologist, and Dr. Savastava says, you have stage 4 colorectal cancer. And so you're going to come in tomorrow, we'll tell you all about it. But I wanted you to know. And so then I have to walk out of that. And one of the first for me is to tell Shara. who's in the building so I can get to her quickly and tell her those things. And we don't know anything, right? We don't know what does stage 4 mean. We just know it's worse than stages 1 through 3. We don't know. There's just so many firsts, and we've talked about that a lot on our blog posts and stuff like that. So we're not going to go into the first now, but so I'm going through this journey, right? And we could talk about that more. But what I want to hear from you, Shara, is just picking up from that one point where you heard the words stage 4 colorectal cancer. Then what happened with you? Like, what was your journey? Because you were seeing it from a completely different perspective.
Wow. So I felt really quickly the irony of my feeling like I had control in my life, and then how quickly those words changed any sense of feeling that I had control in my life. That I didn't, holidays would be different, everything would be different having heard those words. Sleep. I sleep a lot less than I used to before hearing those words. And then it just affects everything.
Yeah. So when we first met, we started in 10 years of church ministry. And then we were both burnt out, and we really wanted to make, we kind of had to career start over in the middle of our lives. And we end up in Bellingham, Washington, working for Logos Bible Software, which then later becomes Faith Life, if you're familiar with that. And one of the greatest companies we've ever worked for, one of the greatest places we live, one of the longest places that we have lived. And so we really liked Washington State and Bellingham, Washington. And so we get there, and then that kind of starts this whole career thing where we're not in pastoral ministry, but we're kind of associated with the church, or we're still in Bible software. And then I take a vice president position down here in outreach, and again, still working kind of in that church space, and it frees you up to spend more time with the girls who are, having, like we talked about, like needing bust everywhere and everything. And so it gave you a break from having to work on that. And then I, transitioned to a few other things, but then the point I'm trying to make is that we were always kind of tied to pastoral ministry. We left it, but we never did totally leave it. We're always in a small group. We were always, Shara's playing in the band, I'm doing front of house or some other, position and volunteering and different things like that. And so there's always this association with the church. And that's one of the things that we want to talk to you about in this podcast in particular, because I know that it made a world of difference in my life. I know it's made a world of difference in your life, is that, and I understand if you wanted us to write a book on church hurt and churches hurting you and people who call themselves Christians and the impact that they can have in your lives for the negative, we could write that book. We could write 10 books on that. So I just want to take a moment and just I know that not everybody's journey with church has been, wonderful and rainbows and sunshine, and it hasn't been for us either. So I don't want you to hear that's not the case. And even in this cancer thing, it hasn't been the case 100%. But I think what we have to do is, when we try to maintain that our trust and our hope is in Jesus and what he built and what he intended the church to be, that we have to understand that as a human institution, it often falls short. And that there are many times where, if we're honest, we fall short, and that we could have done a better job at helping somebody, loving somebody, saying the right thing, doing the right thing, and getting involved. So I think when we look at the big thing, we have to kind of take that perspective when we think of church. But one of the biggest things that as many people who maybe were uncomfortable with cancer and kind of fell off the radar in our lives, I think one of the most beautiful things is what happened here, because with our transition into cancer, shortly after that, we transitioned away from ministry. It wasn't our choice, but that's what the church decided. And so we find ourselves looking for a church home while facing cancer for the first time. And so it was a challenge. But I'll have to say, so many friends, Christian friends from the Christian community, came out of the woodwork and just became exactly what we needed. And so that's one of the things I wanted you to share about too, because I think in your journey, you needed some things specifically they were a little bit different than things that I needed, right? And we were trying to learn this kind of dance between how we communicate with one another and how we face these challenges and different things. But I know that there are so many people that were instrumental in your life that came out of the woodwork. Weren't even people that we went to church with all the time, right?
Mhm.
Some of them were, but some of them were actually people from other churches in town that just all of a sudden just came and built this beautiful relationship with us that moved deeper and closer in the midst of all this turmoil. So I wanted you to share, just from your perspective, what did your church community, the ones who responded well, what did that church community mean to you, do for you, and help you?
Um, it's a long list. We have had hundreds of people help us monetarily, which means we've been able to pay medical bills and other bills that we have. In addition to that, I have people who don't live anywhere near me that check in on me. I have people in my life who have a counselor, and other people who have done a really good job of taking care of my heart. And that has meant the world to me. And it's been in a lot of different forms, just talking with me, checking in on me, checking how my heart is doing, allowing myself to be, real and raw and honest in those moments, feeling safe with the people where I could say, well, today I'm having a really bad day. I didn't sleep. This happened. This set me back. I thought I was making progress in this area of my spiritual journey, and then this happened, things like that. I have been very blessed by people taking care of me that way. And we've had a ton of people provide for us monetarily, as well as providing us meals. So.
And I think, one of the things that is interesting is for me, the journey became one that first, I kind of identified with my mom, but it was just a short time. I didn't have to go a long distance with mom. I mean, it was 72 hours in hospice, and then she was gone. And so for me, I hadn't done this long journey thing. And then the more and more we came acquainted with stage 4 colorectal cancer, we became more acquainted with the long journey, the long game. This could be 16, 18, 20 months, 24 months of chemotherapy, week in and every other week, starting on Wednesday. And this is going to be the new norm. And so I was facing all these questions of, can I power through it? Can I keep my strength? Can I continue to go to the gym and stay as healthy as I can? What kind of effect will this have on me physically? Will I lose my hair? Like all these things that you ask and go through. And so there were lots of ways that my friends, and Christian friends stood up and were there. I have, friends that were working out. I got friends that were working out with me. I've got friends that are going out every Saturday morning for coffee with me, and just pouring out. I had a friend take me, a similar friend take me out on a fishing trip up in Minnesota. There are all these ways in which I could get like an outlet, or I was getting support from them. But I think one of the things for me was just this mind challenge. All of us have these things that we face in life, and all of us have all these things that we've gone through. And I think for me, I look back and I was looking at kind of my story, and I was looking at autism played a major part in my story early on, and made me always kind of feel different than everybody else. I think being a pastor's kid, where my dad took over churches that were struggling with relationships and everything like that. And so we were a short stint here, a short stint there, a short stint there, and we kept moving. And so in that way, it was always, I had something a little different about me than anybody else. I didn't grow up in that hometown. I was kind of transplanted in, and then I was only there for a short time, and then I moved. So the challenge of making friends and having deep relationships was difficult for me. But I just kind of looked. I was blind in my eye at 7. I kind of looked at all these things, and I was like, man, I mean, like all of these things pile up, and now stage 4 colorectal cancer, and then I don't have a job, And so it just, it weighs on my mind, like, why me? Like, why all of this at once? Couldn't I get like one break, like, have, this dream job comes along that is flexible and works around my cancer or something? I mean, is there something that could, ease this just a little bit, and so in a lot of the blog posts, you'll find me talking about, when people began to pray for us. We got a lot of people that are saying, like, I'm praying for healing and I'm praying for healing. And one of the things that I asked is that, hey, I always want you to pray for healing. And I feel like that's represented in scripture. We've talked about Jesus in the garden saying, Father, if there's any way that this cup can pass from me, then please, Lord. But we know the answer to that was that there is no way that this cup can pass from me. This is something you have to endure, son. And so Jesus sets his mind towards that cross, and then he looks at the hope in the future, and he powers through the shame, the beating, and then death. And then his father comes in and raises him from the dead. And when we see that beauty. And then the same thing with Paul. Paul says, is there any way that this thorn in the flesh can be removed from me? And so then we see him kind of praying in a sense for healing from whatever we're not told exactly what that thorn in the flesh is. Same thing. God answers him directly, which is like, nope, my grace is sufficient for you. So, grace is something that you need to value. And this thing is something you'll have to endure. And so we see that constantly in scripture. And so one of the things that did is start to bring in this idea of praying for, can you pray for hope in the midst of all these circumstances? Can I keep hope? Can I keep peace? Can I keep joy? Because those are things that I have to, be consumed with now, because those dark moments can take over and they can become shadows, and they can really weigh on you. And you're going to have days where you struggle like that, and you're going to face that. And so my challenges were trying to sort through all that, to battle like my heritage. I grew up in a very legalistic church. And so there's always kind of that finger wagging God who's always pointing at you and always has something against you and is always condemning you. And so even though I've moved past that and I don't believe that that is the representation of my Father in heaven, at the same time, when you go back here and you look at all these things that are happening to you, you kind of fall back into some of those that thinking, where you have moments where you struggle with the idea, is God punishing me? Did I do something wrong? Is this because I've made all these mistakes or I've done this? And intellectually, that's not what's going on. But at the same time, it's in the back of your mind, right? Because you understand the areas where you fall short.
Remember that one day we had the garage door not work anymore?
Yeah. It's in the middle of all of this and cancer and everything. And then just this little thing, like just a garage door that's an automatic garage door. And we go out and it's like, and our car is stuck. The only car that we have to drive around to get from point A to point B, and it's caught in a garage, and we can't get it to work. There's nothing we can do. We can't pull the thing and then lift it. There's nothing that we can do to get it. Yeah. So it's just like one of those things is like, really? Like this is gonna happen too on top of everything else. So I'm experiencing all of that from that perspective and trying to work through that in my head. But I think one of the things that you faced is, and you've written a lot about it, is kind of this elephant in the room, in the moments kind of where maybe I fall asleep, or you're in the middle of a room and I'm there, but your mind isn't kind of focused on whatever we're doing. You're kind of over here and you're getting bombarded by this big elephant staring at you. So talk just a little bit about what that perspective was like for you, what that elephant was like. I'm giving you all the easy questions.
You're making me cry over and over. I grew up Church of Christ, legalistic as well, different church, but same sort of stuff. And then my family divorced and had a lot of chaos and dysfunction growing up, but also involving the church. So a lot of what I think were sort of like the testing ground, and also where I developed my relationship with God, where first of all, deciding what my relationship with God was going to be, like everyone does in their teenage, early adult years. That was a pivotal time for me to have my relationship with God become my relationship, and not what I was taught my whole life. So that I had a friend in high school that actually said that James 1:2-4, ironically, was a verse that he encouraged me with a lot. And it's been, I guess the word is just very cool to see God taking care of me from that early on. And everyone struggles, but even that early on, I knew that God was real, and that he takes care of me. He loves me. He cares about how I'm feeling, so when the cancer diagnosis came up, I very quickly decided that, like I said earlier, that I had any illusion that I had of control in my life, that I just sort of laughed with God about the fact that I don't have any of that control that I even thought I had, first of all. But then secondly, I just really, for the first time in my life, God became a lot more real. And he was someone that I would just speak to. Generally it is, we've reversed these roles over the years. It used to be that I was the one who would just, as soon as I hit the bed, I'd go to sleep, but now that's more Pete's MO. And then it's funny too, because it used to be that he would say, can we not talk about stressful or hard things right before sleep, because then I can't go to sleep. Now we have those hard conversations, and like 5 seconds later, Pete's asleep. So then very early on, I would have thoughts of just worst case scenario moments. And at first I didn't think that I could talk about those moments with Pete. So I very quickly, ironically, I had signed up for a forgiving what you can't forget study. And then I signed up for a small group, a counseling group with 5 other people. And then I also very quickly signed up for counseling. And I would speak with my counselor about things that I didn't think that I could tell Pete about at the beginning, because it was all so raw and so stressful and so overwhelming. Those things I have talked about with Pete since, but at first I was just limiting that because I didn't want to add more stress to you.
Yeah.
And then the elephant is, the timing of the elephant is definitely right before I go to sleep. Very overwhelming, negative, stressful, worst case scenario thoughts. And I was able to sort of visualize that elephant so much that I could, I would feel my chest, acknowledge that my chest pain was there, that I was feeling suffocated and overwhelmed. And then I was able to visualize sort of kicking it out the, get off of me, pushing it off of me, kicking it off of me, and reminding myself about the truth about God, that it's always been the same through my parents' divorce, through our church dysfunction, through our having to move a ton, through stress with our family. God has never changed through any of that.
Yeah. So one of the things that we want to do early on in this podcast is, and some of it's going to be pretty humorous, is we want to go from here to kind of this, what we've talked about as he said, she heard, she said, he heard. And so in our next episode, we're going to talk a little bit about that, because you have all these situations, like we're going through different things, like I'm facing cancer in a different way than you are.
Mhm.
And you're having this elephant in the room that's going on. But there's also all these things that she's trying to do as a caregiver that I'll see as something that's like, oh, you think I'm helpless, or you think I'm, worthless, or you think like I'm completely handicapped now. And so that's, robbing me of something. And so we have all these kind of humorous things that have happened. Some of them weren't humorous at the time,
Nope.
but they were definitely a struggle, as she would be doing something out of the kindness of her heart and out of love, which is totally motivated from being selfless. And I was seeing it as, you think that I'm just a terrible, man, and I can't take care of anything anymore, and I might as well just call it, hang up the big, saddle and be done, right? And so we're going to talk a lot about that. But one of the things that I hope that you see in this is that we're going to be pretty raw. We'll be open, and so there's going to be times where she's emotional. There's going to be times when I'm emotional, and we're going to talk about it. But I hope that you benefit from this podcast, from hearing both of our perspectives, and especially hers, because I think it's one that's just, it's underrated. I think that we need to do a better job of caring for caregivers. Everybody rushes in and worries about the guy with cancer, the woman with cancer or whatever, but there's somebody there that's constantly there. And I know that's what we signed up for when we married one another, right? That, for richer, for poor, for sicker, and if we're sick and in health and all those things. But I think that there is just an under appreciation for the challenge that a caregiver goes through, and how the church can come alongside that, and how you as a friend can help somebody who's a spouse or a loved one who's giving care for somebody who's facing cancer. There is a complete stress to it and anxiety to it. And so that's the future of the podcast. We'll talk about things like that. We'll have fun, and we'll have light moments, and we'll also be very raw at times. And so I hope that is something that's appealing to you. So we love all of you. We always want to tell you that at the end of every episode. We love you. We care about you. If you're in a cancer fight, you're not alone. If you're a caregiver and you're giving care to a cancer fighter, you're not alone. And so just know you can reach out to us through the stages.community site, and you just go to stages.community and you'll get our website, and then you can go right there and you can reach out to us, and you can reach us there. So just please, our email is there, everything's there to get a hold of us, and we will write back right away. And we'll start to come alongside you in the battle. And if we can, we'll try to put people who are close to you in that battle with you too, as we kind of journey that with you. But we love you. We hope you have a great week, and stay tuned for episode dose. Is that right? Dose? Yes, I think so. All right. Love you guys.